Good morning, guys. I'm going to show you a little bit how to look over your feedback and altitude and on your writing on your Google Docs and just show you some tips to show you what's going along. I'm going to use this paper and this card because the student did a really good job and I don't think they'll mind me sharing it. But you may have noticed this weekend that I first gave you formative feedback. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the card, you will see my formative feedback. This student on the first round um, got, this was a very common piece of general feedback that I gave everyone. And then I gave really specific ones on the two standards. If you look over here to the right, you'll see that there are two standards being assessed on this card. One is making connections on gathered data. That's an association standard. The other is communication, can write with clarity using the conventions of modern grammar. So if you hover over, you can see that there are open circles, which are formative scores. Remember that formative is practice. And then there are closed circles, ovals, they're really ovals, which is summative score. And that means that counts towards your final assessment. You'll find that I try to be really fair with those. I don't really give you a summative until I feel like you're ready and you've had a round or two of formatives. And this card represents that because the first round you had was formative. And you may say, like, when we get to looking at the feedback, you may say, well, how was I supposed to know to write in the third person? You didn't tell us. Or how was I supposed to know that I needed to say the title and the authors? Well, you weren't. It's practice. And if you came in knowing all that, I would be unhappy because you wouldn't need me and wouldn't be much for me to teach you. So I'm not upset. Those aren't like, that's not me getting mad at you. That's me teaching you. And one of the ways we do that is through robust feedback on your docs. So let's switch over here and look at this document. Now, for this student, I already gave her a first round of feedback. And so if I go up here, let me get the full menu. If I go up here and search for feedback, comments, history, you will see that there was a lot of feedback that this student read, and she did exactly as I asked. She read the feedback and she went through and resolved each one. And as she resolved it, she eliminated my comments from it. So you can see marked as resolved yesterday. She marked them as resolved, which is exactly. She actually got a heart there, if you'll notice, because she used her commas correctly in some really tricky ways. And that was impressive. But this is the feedback that she already resolved, and I can only see that by going to comment history. You can too. But then she turned it back in, and there's just a couple things I want to point out. Once again, this isn't me being mad and saying, you guys are terrible. I'm always going to point out things that you can do better in your writing. And as you progress and become a better writer, those things are going to ramp up and become a little more high level and complex. And so that's a good example of this, what the student has done here. So um, she mentioned something here that I didn't remember from the article. So I just said, is that mentioned in the article, that they unintentionally use this guideline? And if that's an opinion, you want to keep it out of summary writing. Remember that summary is telling me that you got the author's main points and you know how to restate them. And so keep that in mind. There were an awful lot of people that would put their opinion or how great this article was or how much it helped me. None of that has a place in summary writing. Summary is in the article, Innovators DNA by Jeffrey Dyer, Hal Gregerson, and Clayton Christensen. That's one of the reasons you tell what article you're talking about and who wrote it and what were the author's moves, what were they trying to get me to learn, and in what order, how did they do it? So she did a great job of that here. This was a very common error that people made. They would either write in first person and say, I learned so much, we need this, or something like that. But a lot of you also chose to write in second person as if you were talking to the reader, which I love second person. It has a very interesting use. But in this particular writing, unless you're told differently, always write in third person, which means you don't use I, me, we, you, any of those first or second person pronouns. So I had actually commented on this earlier in her writing, but one of these snuck by her. When I comment on one of those, I don't mean just fix this one. And I really haven't taught you this before. So, like I said, not mad, just being real clear so you know how we work together. So, when I say write in third person, remember third person means, kind of explain it again. And then it says search these thoroughly throughout your writing and make the changes. That means be sure you catch all of them. So when I give you these changes, I don't mean just change these things and turn it back in and I'm going to give you an advanced and shine the sunlight on you and put a halo on your head. That's not how this works. When I give you something that you need to check, that means that I want you to go through and find all instances of that mistake and fix your problem. And when you do that, it's going to stick in your brain better and you're not going to make that mistake as much. Now, new trick. Remember, I gave you I gave you Grammarly, wonderful Grammarly. So if you look down here, there's a little tiny gray G, and if you click on it, it'll turn green and it'll check your work. Now, I have a feeling that this student has already done that because you can see just a little 1 comes up down there, which means she only has 1 suggestion. And that suggestion is a synonym, and she looked at that and knows that observing is actually the perfect word to leave in this because observing is what she meant to say. So she knew to look at that and say, thanks for the suggestion, Grammarly. That's one I really don't need. And then you close it. I have a feeling there were probably others that she did use. But then as she goes through each of these, she's going to hit this check, mark them as resolved. So when I go back in and I see none of my comments are still there, I'll know that she's done this work. And then you'll go back to your card. And for me, this says move to. See, I can move your stuff to focus, submitted, or approved. But for you, it'll say turn it back in. And for all of you, I intended to change this due date to Wednesday to give you a little time to go over these comments. So if yours doesn't say that, it either means you didn't turn this writing in initially, or I forgot to change it to Wednesday. So that's all for that. I think kind of going over this might help you a little bit. So now, excuse me, if you look back, she has 2 formative assessments. Sorry, I switched students here. Let me go back up. There it is. 2 formative assessments. Those are practice rounds. And remember, that's exactly what that means, practice rounds. So you can try things, you can take risks in your writing, you can use words you're not sure about. This is where you get experimental. Then in the second round, after she made her corrections, I went back. She actually corrected her mistake in this question. I had given her feedback that her first one was right, the second one was right, and then the third one I had told her we added communication. Some people had trouble with that one, and you had to look at the standards that we have and compare them to the innovator's DNA and figure out which one was different. So after that, she was able to do that. She corrected her card and she put communications. So that score actually went up. The writing still has a little work, but that is a perfect place to be at this point in the year. If you were getting all advanced on all your writing, like I said, you wouldn't need me and I could just go back home and get into bed. But